So, how is everyone? I hope you are all well. Now, I was going to do a live later. I'm going to change that. I'm going to do a live on Wednesday. But what I am going to do is anyone who comments on this video and comments with the hashtag airings, you're going to get entered into a draw. Flannels. Not sponsored by Flannels. You may remember these if you've been around the channel for a while. I had a pair of these before. These are the off-white, silver, made in Italy, paperclip style earrings. And there you go. That is what is up for grabs. Hashtag earrings. Anyway. Into the meat and potatoes, because we've got a fair bit to get through. For those of you who are unfamiliar, obviously Stephen Smith is the young man who was killed around the Murdoch family. Another kind of, what can we say, is it right to say suspicious? Well, look, it was suspicious, but it was a death that was at the time deemed a hit and run. And it's now been reopened as a homicide. Now we've seen the matriarch, if you like, the boss, the kingpin sent down the road. So, what do I mean by that? We've got a situation where the case is finally being looked into properly. There's nobody kind of pulling the strings. There's no one giving anybody money to keep them quiet, anything like that. This is just straightforward. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of what happened to Stephen Smith. So we're going to look through it because there is some shocking stuff that's now starting to come out in this case, and later on in the video you're going to hear of something that just sounds so bizarre that one detail in itself should have been enough to think, look, something ain't right here, something is not right. But let's have a look through the initial paperwork now and just see what is actually going on in this case. So here we go. So we've got Stephen Smith investigators had Buster Murdoch tips and suspected homicide. So what they're basically saying in here is, you know, Buster Murdoch was mentioned early days in this. You know, it was a name that cropped up not once, not twice, but several times. Look, officials originally suspected foul play in the death of South Carolina teen Stephen Smith, and had heard rumours about the student's links to Buster Murdoch within weeks of the mysterious supposed hit-and-run files from the initial investigation reveal. I'm not sure if I even read that right. The extensive reports released this week by Fitz News include details from officers who responded to the grisly scene in the early hours of July 8th, 2015. A suspicious death. Smith, 19, was found face down in the middle of Sandy Run Road in Hampton County, South Carolina, with some sort of blunt force trauma to the head. Now, I'm going to come back to this because I think this element here is incredibly important, and I have a real horrible feeling about this. And that, it almost gave me a flashback to the 13 Reasons Why. If any of you have watched that, there's a situation that happens in 13 Reasons Why, and I think some of you will now, the cogs will start, when I mention what I mention later, it'll all fall into place. Some sort of blunt force trauma to the head. South Carolina Department of Public Safety, SEDPS, Officer DB Rolls summary of the crime scene, reads, "We see no evidence to suggest the victim was struck by a vehicle," the note continues. The nursing student was spotted around 4 a.m. by Ronnie Capers Jr., who drove by the body on his way to work and called 911. Smith was found with his iPhone and car keys in his pocket, and his car was later found a couple of miles from the scene, parked off the road with the gas tank door open and the gas cap hanging down. Now, that for me, I find quite bizarre. That, to me, why would, if somebody runs out of fuel, would they then go and open the cap and leave the cap open, unless they are at that stage believing that there is being gas put back into the car? You know, I don't know whether that would be your initial go-to. I'm not sure, but that little, the devil's in the detail, they say, don't they? And that just stuck out as, why was that even left open? Why was it open? Several write-ups from other responding officers, including one from the South Carolina Highway Patrol, identified as Booker, note that Smith's death appeared to be a homicide. So you think to yourself, why would your initial thought, even if you find a body on a road and they're clearly deceased, why would your initial thoughts be that this is a homicide? Because surely your go-to, if you find a body laying in a road, would be, this is a hit and run. But for them to appear to be a homicide, now I would put this down to the fact that, was this where he noted that there was only injuries around the head and other injuries that would seemingly look like defensive wounds? Or was there something else that didn't make sense? So we read on. Conflicting multiple early reports also state that Smith had what appeared to be a gunshot wound above his right brow and a defensive wound to one of his hands. Remember that, gunshot wound. A conflicting autopsy. The nature of Smith's death, however, was changed later that day following an autopsy by pathologist Dr. Erin Presnell, who ruled that the teen was killed by a vehicle hit and run. We've just got a little diagram here that gives you where he was found. There was obviously a light here. So either where he was found, he was literally illuminated. But anyway, it's not important. SEHP Sergeant Thomas Moore reportedly had a heated conversation with Presnell about her findings. When pressed further by SCHP investigator Todd Proctor, she said she determined the cause of death because there was no gunshot wound and Smith was in the road. So was there a gunshot wound or wasn't there a gunshot wound? As I was leaving the state, she stated that the report was preliminary and it was my job to figure out find out what it was struck him, not hers. I made that a lot more complicated than it needed to be. Proctor recalled the tense meeting. In mid-August, over a month after Smith's death, Hampton County Coroner Ernie Washington told Proctor that he did not agree with Presnell's conclusion and that she had allegedly been let go from his office. Meanwhile, Moore's report on Smith's death noted that there was no glass fragments or other evidence of a motor vehicle at the scene or on Smith's body. Now, why we're talking about glass fragments is what they were trying to say was to kind of explain why there was just a head injury and there was no other impactual injuries, was because they're saying that he'd been struck by a passing vehicle's wing mirror, the side mirror, and the side mirror had perhaps hit him in the head. And they're saying, well, if it had hit him so hard that it killed him, surely it would have broken the mirror. There'd have been glass evidence. Bizarre behaviour. The trove of documents from the weeks following Smith's death also show that his family, including his parents, Joel and Sandy Smith, doubted the official conclusion that the son was struck down while walking in the middle of the road. A handwritten report by Corporal M.E. Duncan, dated July 9, states that the family said Smith was skittish and would never have been walking in the middle of the roadway. That was something that we touched on in the last video. And this here is that handwritten note. And look whose name is in it. So we've got 200 feet down where Stephen was found. States the impression was in fact an ant mound. Also says another print was not visible because of rain. Contacted Angela Carroll in reference to Stephen Smith's death. Information from Stephanie Smith states a boy named Brendan asked if Stephen and Buster Murdoch ever had any type of relationship. Attempted to call Brandon, phone, and no answer message. So his name was being brought up early on. Smith's twin sister, Stephanie, told Duncan that her brother became very secretive in the 2 weeks before he died. Sandy Smith corroborated this assessment, saying she became concerned when her son stopped studying and started missing school. Police also interviewed Mark Bickhart, an older man who claimed that he and Smith were in a relationship. According to a few officers' notes, Bickhart insisted Smith's death was a result of foul play, but often confused his own timelines. Later in July, he reported anonymous phone calls that promised he would die like his boyfriend and accused Sandy Smith of harassing him in person. Bickhart also posted on a rambling Facebook update, apparently aimed at Smith's family, blaming them for his death. The Murdoch connection. So within a month of Smith's death, investigators received multiple tips that suggested Buster Murdoch may have been involved in the incident. Buster, now 26, is a surviving son of low-country legal scion Alex Murdoch, who was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms earlier this month. Yada, yada, yada. Buster and Smith were high school classmates, and Smith's body was notably found not far from the 1,700-acre Moselle estate where Alex Murdoch later gunned down his loved ones. On August 7th, 2015, Duncan notes that a source named Angela Carroll reported that a boy named Brendan Struther asked if Smith and Buster had been in a relationship. That was the note that we saw. But when Duncan followed up with Brendan a few days later, he clarified that the comments were just rumours. In mid-December, Duncan recorded an anonymous tip email that alleged Dontero Aitken, along with another black male and white male, Murdoch, are the ones involved in Smith's death. Just days later, Duncan reportedly received a call from a man named Darrell Williams, who said his stepson, Patrick Wilson, told him that someone named Sean Conley struck and killed Smith. So this was constantly about people being involved and this not being a hit and run. And the fact that it didn't get looked into, it didn't get reopened. Williams, who did not return the officer's follow-up call, said he reached out because Alex Murdoch's brother, Randy Murdoch, told him to call. In another bizarre twist, Smith's family recently claimed that Randy Murdoch also reached out to them after his death and offered to investigate the incident pro bono before allegedly ditching the case. The release of the early files of Stephen Smith's death are part of an avalanche of information that has come to light since the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division reopened the investigation in June 2021 based on information gleaned during the probe into Maggie and Paul Murdoch's shooting deaths. There you go. There's Sandy with a picture of Stephen there. This woman is an absolute hero, by the way. Late last week, Sandy Smith announced that a GoFundMe. So this is regarding the independent autopsy and the exhumation, relisted as a homicide. While Smith's death has been largely overshadowed by the Murdoch family saga, Sandy Smith recently told the Post she hopes Alex Murdoch's conviction will help shed light on her son's demise. And, you know, it just goes on to say about them being brought down. Buster goes on record to say that he's obviously got nothing to do with this. But this is now the bit that we're talking about. So this is the shocker. So look at this. This is here. Let me go back to this screen quickly. Let's just get that off the screen and go here. So this here, look. So a rape kit ordered on Stephen Smith within hours of his death. A rape kit was reportedly ordered hours after Stephen Smith's body was discovered following what officials initially claimed was a hit and run. Michael Duncan, a former South Carolina Highway Patrol supervisor, told News Nation's Ashley Banfield during an exclusive interview Wednesday that this was the first time he had seen this kind of kit being ordered for a traffic incident. I'm not going to go balls deep into that because there you go. That piece of information is that's enough. Do you know what I mean? Why? Why was that kit needed? And again, for some of you, you know, if you've watched 13 Reasons Why, and there's a situation that happens in there, and I wonder whether this is something that had happened here. Was this a crime that was motivated because of sexuality? Was that, you know, this seems to point in that direction. Or was it something to silence someone? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. But this case, with all this stuff coming to light, it concerns you how many things can actually point in a certain direction and still be controlled. Especially when we've got cases like the Idaho case still out there. And it does then raise questions. How much can the narratives of these crimes be controlled by law enforcement and be controlled by powerful people who want to point things in a certain direction? It's a worry. It's a worry. Because where you think that the law and this protect and serve situation is something that we can rely on, this just proves it can be bought and sold very easily. Let me know your thoughts down below. Remember, #airings. Good luck, and I'll catch you all in the next one.